starting with what's happening in Israel, Fleur, how do you see the ground situation? If you could describe to us the atrocities on civilians and the kind of things that you see around you. Where are you located right now? What do you see around?
So I'm in Jerusalem with my family, with 3 out of my 4 children. My daughter went to the army this morning, so I'm a little stressed about that. And about an hour ago, there was a siren, so we all ran to the shelter and basically moved my work to Zoom. There's no schools at the moment. And there's an eerie quiet here in Jerusalem because this is not the focus of the fighting here in Jerusalem. But again, because it's such a diverse population, we have to keep our finger on the pulse to make sure that nothing spills over onto here.
Talking about the reserves and young, soldiers going in, including your daughter, how old is she, and is she part of the reserve? Is she part of the main IDF?
She's part of the main IDF. She recruited 2 months ago. I have an older son also in the IDF, but he's in a technical role, so I'm less worried about him. Her base is down south, so my husband and I are very worried, but please God, she should be okay.
We have seen very horrific videos, graphic details of how civilians, particularly women, children, elderly, handicapped, being taken in to Gaza. What are the reports, and how is the government really dealing with this?
So first of all, this is nothing short of a massacre. It's also the biggest civilian attack in Israel's history. A few weeks ago, we were pondering in the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, could Israel have another Yom Kippur War? Could we be surprised? Little did we know that a couple of weeks later, we'd be in this situation where the country is in shock and trauma at the moment. We're trying to kind of find our feet, deal with a hostage situation, which we've never had on this scale, never. 130 people taken, like you mentioned, elderly, sick, disabled, children, toddlers, babies. They have not discriminated. They came to target civilians. This is also a war where more civilians have been hurt than combatants, which is almost unheard of. And that is because these people, these terrorists, actively target civilians. That's what they came here to do. And so we pray that we can come up with a plan, first of all, to get rid of the terrorists that are still here in Israel. We still have a few running around the south of the country. Secondly, getting a plan in place to bring back the hostages. And thirdly, to somehow dismantle the terrorist infrastructure that has been built in Gaza. And I have to mention that this has not been done. They haven't done this on their own. They've done this with help from Iran and other genocidal regimes in the neighborhood. And there's a bigger regional story here about Israel normalizing with Saudi Arabia and Iran wanting to put a stop to that.
When we're talking of hostages, how many hostages? What are the reports in Israel that you hear? And the government figures which say how many civilians have been killed, how many have been taken hostage, including the defense?
So at the moment, they're talking about north of 700 dead, 2,500 injured, and of those, about 300 odd seriously injured. So we don't know if they're going to make it. And the Hamas have declared that they have 130 hostages.
These hostages would also include some of the defense personnel?
Yeah.
When you talk of Jerusalem, and you were telling us last time that you have a mix of the community where you have the ultra-Orthodox, you have the Orthodox, you have range of people living there. How do you see the situation now within cities? Is it also tense? How is the population really reacting to it?
Well, in Jerusalem, we have to keep our finger on the pulse because 40% of the population here is Muslim. Most people are peacekeeping, Arab Muslims that we live and we work with every single day. But we know that there are Hamas sleeper cells in the east part of the city. And so we're keeping our finger on the pulse so that they don't go out and try and open another front. So we've got our finger on the pulse. We've got extra security, and we're working with local leaders to make sure that everybody stays calm.
So if we talk of the Israeli policy, you've also had you've kind of given passage to people from Gaza Strip to come in and work. There is, this whole population that has come in who are working as, working in different sectors. Is it also, is the government suspicious that people who've been coming in, including for jobs or during the festive season, particularly right now, who might have had ulterior motives and they were part of a larger plan of the Hamas? Do you think that's possible?
I've heard rumors that that is the case, but I can't confirm or deny. I'm not privy to that type of information, but I've seen some reports that some of the people actually crossed legitimately who were terrorists.
And how do you see with, the world looking at Israel as a country with, extreme, tight security measures, including whether it's cyber, whether it's the Iron Dome, with these kind of, incursions that have happened from the border, which is not a very long stretch, but to have the fence being pulled down and people coming in, was there intelligence? Do you see it as an intelligence failure of sorts?
I think that everybody agrees that something's gone terribly wrong here. And I think that this is affecting and will affect our deterrence. And we need to restore that very quickly and find out exactly what happened so it never happens again.
When we talk of the Middle East policy, and of course we're talking of normalization of ties with, Middle Eastern countries, how do you see this getting impacted terribly now?
So that's a good question. I want to be an optimist. I've been very involved, as you know, with the Abraham Accords work. I don't see any countries reversing the Abraham Accords. I see that the road with Saudi Arabia may be a little longer now, but this is very clear that the Iranians do not want Israel to normalize ties with Saudi Arabia. And let's hope that once this war is finished, we pray that the casualties don't go much higher than they already are, that we can get back on track with peace and normalization with the rest of the Arab world. You know, the region is divided into two: the countries that want peace and prosperity and the countries that want destruction and radicalism. It's very clear where Israel is. It's very clear where the UAE is, Bahrain, and it's also clear where Saudi is. We all know who's on the other side of that axis, and the world should understand what we're dealing with here.
As you mentioned, a lot of hard work by a lot of people, including you, has gone into the Abraham Accords. Personally or, government-wise, are you in touch with your friends in different, who are part of this whole collaboration? How are they really reacting? What do they really say to you?
Well, the most touching thing, actually, which I've actually not mentioned yet in any interviews, is that I've had so many messages of concern from friends from Morocco, from the UAE, from Bahrain. I can't tell you how touched we've all been, the people in this ecosystem that we have with the Abraham Accords countries, how touched we've been from the concerns from our friends in the Gulf and Morocco. And I mean, I haven't stopped receiving messages of support and concern and empathy. And so at least we know that the bonds that we've built are strong bonds.
Do you see businesses also getting affected because you've headed the business councils, you've had various meetings while you've been visiting all these countries now? Do you think people are going to be scared or there's going to be some kind of skepticism when collaborations happen in future?
I don't think so. I think this will be a little bump on the road, but we're heading towards $3 billion of trade with the UAE. Of course, as you know, we are very much good friends and good trading partners with India. I'm very involved in this thing called I2U2, which is India, Israel, UAE, USA. And I believe that will get back on track once we finish this terrible war.
How's the government doing? There are reports that, the opposition party leaders have, kind of reached out saying that they could form a joint coalition government. How do you see, the extreme right leaders who were part of this and who are also looking at a certain kind of retaliatory, action? Do you think there's consensus in the political spectrum?
I think when it comes to an attack of this scale, there's no right and there's no left, and there shouldn't be divisions in the country. And I think this is the moment, definitely the moment for national unity and potentially a national unity government.
as a woman leader from Israel, you've faced, I'm sure, whole lot of challenges coming up to a level where you're now heading a key position in Jerusalem. Again, which is extremely dominated by uh, men. If we look at the political setup in Israel, how do you see these challenges now coming as some sort of a setback or a threat to women, particularly?
Well, look, just have to look at the regime in Gaza. They are a misogynistic, homophobic regime, much like Iran, who's killing its women for having their hair not covered, etc. And so we're looking at the same people. We also in Gaza, you have a problem where little girls are married off to older men. I mean, the women's rights there are practically non-existent. I see my role as a woman and as a woman leader to make sure people understand what goes on in these communities in the hope that they will help us dismantle these terrible misogynistic regimes. And in terms of women's leadership in Israel, you see many fantastic leaders speaking out at the moment, even in the army, women generals and women commanders. And we should be hearing more voices of women in general in this country.
So, are you in touch with your children? And how long do you think this war, as we call it, has begun? And how long do you think this is going to wreak havoc on both sides?
Yeah, well, three of my children are home. My son in the army is a technical staff, so he comes and goes every day. My daughter just went back to her base this morning in the south. So I just spoke to her on the phone, and hopefully I'll be able to speak to her every day, at least for a few minutes.
Has there been some kind of a let up in the rockets being fired from that area? Because we saw a whole lot of visuals coming out of armed terrorist jeeps going around Israeli streets and cities, killing people, and also the rockets being fired. What's the situation? Has it come down in 2 days? Has it increased?
In the south, there were still guns on the street, terrorists gunning people down. Yesterday, even this morning, I'm hoping it's quietened down. In terms of the sirens in Jerusalem, it was mainly the first day. Also this morning, in the center of the country, it's been tougher there with the sirens. And up north, we've had some problems. Nothing's quiet at the moment. Nothing.
And we hear that if the construction rules kind of mandate that every house should have a shelter room, uh, are people mostly in the shelter rooms? Are they going out for jobs? What is the situation? Are those universities
So
and the schools shut?
we're not in our shelter all the time, only when the siren goes. Because I'm one of the lucky people that has a shelter in my house, but a lot of people with older houses don't have shelters and they have to go to the city shelters, which the mayor promptly opened up on Saturday morning. So there are a lot of public shelters. And it's very quiet on the street. The kids are not in school. People are home and people are working from home. Some people are working, of course, but Israel, as you know from your visit, is a very alive place. Always the streets and the restaurants and cafes buzzing with activity. Everything is very, very quiet right now.
And when we talk of Hamas, do you think what's the reading within Israel of Hezbollah joining in, or other terrorist organizations also lending support? What kind of support base do you think these people have that they've been able to sustain this kind of attack for so long?
I don't know, but Hezbollah made some noises yesterday up north to see, they started doing some rumblings, and I think Israel quickly quelled that. We're hoping there are no more fronts being opened up. But in the end, look, Israel has one of the most powerful armies in the world. It has one of the most powerful and advanced technologies, defense technologies in the world. This is really a slip up, but I know that eventually Israel will overcome and we will win. That's not the question. The question is not whether we're going to win or not win. The question is, what is the price going to be? How many innocents will die? That is the question, and that is what's keeping us up all at night.
So you're hopeful. You're saying that you still feel, that the US, also has been working alongside Israel. I'm sure even now that there are reports of, lending assistance of sorts. and standing in where a lot of countries are expressing solidarity, you would still think that there is this whole scope of normalization, just as it's being attempted with the Middle East, and there would be eventually no setback to the whole process that has taken a lot of hard work.
This is a setback to the process, but I don't think it finishes off the process. I think we can get back on track. I do.
I know it's not the right time, but you see some kind of policy failure or also within people. We've seen street protests in the last many months over the judicial reforms, and there has been this kind of a discontent within the society as well, and now it's kind of precipitated into this whole war also. How do you see some kind of uh, not a failure of sorts, but responsibility with the government also in terms of how people have been disappointed on various fronts, and today this is what's happening.
Well, I think that the enemy always smells weakness. And when we are busy fighting each other, the enemy is not ignoring that. And I'm sure the timing had something to do with that. And I think if we've been taught anything is that what we need more than anything is unity, and not fighting amongst each other. We have enough enemies wanting to kill us for us to want to fight each other. And so I hope that if there's one very small silver lining on this cloud, is that we'll band together and we'll put aside these silly disagreements that are not existential, like the attacks and the massacre that we've just seen.
True. Recently, we also saw, at the G20, and of course, Israel was a big part of this whole, corridor that we were talking of with from India, Middle East, up into the Mediterranean, with Israel being a key center. Do you think this has also got to do with, forces who do not want to see this coming up?
Absolutely. It's all about, like I said earlier, the region, including India, being divided into countries wanting peace and prosperity, evolving their countries in order to bring people to their potential, and countries that want to take us back 500 years. And the G20 are the countries that want progress, the countries that want prosperity. And these genocidal, misogynistic, homophobic regimes do not want that. They don't want that.
Are you setting foot outside? Are you moving around? Are you interacting with friends and family? What's your daily routine like now compared to what you were doing days ago?
Well, days ago, I was barely home because I work hard, as you know. And now I've moved. This morning I was out to do an interview outside, but essentially in the last few days, I've been home and I've moved all my work on Zoom. It feels like a COVID, but with a horrible, tragic circumstances,
What's your message to women, children in the Middle East and across, the international spectrum, in times like war, when you have men going and fighting, and there is this sense of empathy that does come from, the other gender. So as a woman leader, global woman leader, what's your message to the world on what's happening in Israel?
My message is this, Israel has always had its hands outstretched for peace, always. We never started any wars. We won them, but we never started them. And we have no problem with the Palestinian people. I myself have many different Palestinian friends, peace activists who I engage with on a daily basis. Our problem is not the Palestinian people, their women, their children. Our problem is a toxic leadership that has given nothing to their people except the false hope that one day they're going to kill all the Jews and kick us all out. There's no talk of resolution there. There's no talk of two-state solution there. It's all about kicking us out. It's in the Hamas charter. And so my call is on those populations to, try and affect change for better leadership. Let women take more leadership roles, because I'm sure that we can come to definitely a more peaceful consensus than what we're seeing right now.
Last question, when we see young children, teenagers, or even, adults in their 20s, on both sides, with so much aggression, there is anger, there is hurt on both sides. How do you see, what kind of efforts does Israel need to make also, or countries need to make in terms of de-radicalization of a large population that is kind of reacting and venting in a very brutal manner today, where the world stands divided? What do you think are the
Well,
de-radicalization efforts being made
well,
in Israel, and what should be done?
Well, first of all, the Palestinian school system has their school books are full of incitement, hatred, anti-Semitism. They're not teaching anything, about peace or coexistence or anything like that. Israeli school books, on the other hand, do. So they have an institutionalized problem with their educational system, and the whole world is funding this education system. So the first thing to do is make sure that the aid that they're giving the Palestinians is done on condition that they're not paying for the radicalization of these children, because essentially then what they're doing is taking us further away from peace and not closer to peace. So that's the first thing I would say that needs to be done.
Have you had also political meetings, or has the parliament met repeatedly over this issue? And what kind of emergency steps do you think are going to be taken in the next few days?
Well, I've had meetings on a local level with the mayor of Jerusalem to try and figure out how to keep the city calm. And this evening, we've got a meeting with the foreign minister. So we will keep meeting in a hope that this war will end quickly and less painfully than what we've had in the last few days.
Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll stay in
Thank
touch
you.
with you, and we will speak again.